Alright, I think we should be live. Welcome everybody to another week of our live show on game design topics here on Game Wisdom. I am Josh Blaser, and joining me, unfortunately, sans PC this week, is indie developer Shark.
Hello. If anybody knows the audio quality's gone down, that's on my cell phone on mobile Discord because my PC is. Because my motherboard decided to fry itself. It's like, oh, you wanted to shut off your computer? Well, guess what? The motherboard is going to shut down forever.
Mm-hmm. And now
I have to go through the whole maze of trying to replace it. It's either waiting forever on a replacement used motherboard for $150, or essentially building a new PC building probably about half a PC, but most of the PC, 60% of a PC, and waiting about a week on that. Hopefully, the one part that I'm worried about, the processor, will be here on Friday. This coming Friday, because it said it was going to be anywhere between Friday and Tuesday, and if it's not Friday, then it's definitely not going to be in the weekend. Then that means we'll have to do another podcast like this.
Joy.
Get my PC for the next one.
And it also means Shark cannot see the chat right now, so if you want to say anything behind his back, this is the perfect cast to do it.
Except for when I go back and watch the playthrough.
Oh yeah, of course. But it has been another very crazy week in the United States, as I'm sure everybody is well aware of. And unfortunately put a damper on putting out a lot more interesting posts, because it didn't really make sense to do that while, the United States was rioting, on top of the viral pandemic.
Yeah, on top of my computer blowing up.
Again, everything just happens at once around here.
On top of 3 games to make it at the same time.
Yeah.
Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong.
And I got to design 2 presentations in the next few months, and I got, of course, a book to write on top of everything else.
Yeah. On top of all that, my programmer delayed yet again. And tons of other issues. Like this week has not been my week.
Yeah. Again, it always happens when something good happens, something bad happens to just snap it right back into place.
Or one thing good happens and then 500 bad things happen. It's like nope, no happy for you.
But
it makes you long for the mediocre.
But we just gotta keep plugging at it as always. Let's see. What is some interesting news that's been happening this week? And I guess here's one: the whole Take-Two kerfuffle. I think I said that right. That it was announced.
Yeah. I'm forgetting what it was exactly, but I remember it.
So what happened, according to the news bit, is that the success of Kerbal Space Program led to them starting to make a sequel. Take-Two took the rights, so I don't think the original developers are responsible for it anymore. And then during development, or very recently, Take-Two has decided to cancel the contract in an attempt to kind of snatch up or acquire the employees of the studio that they are basically dooming because they're canceling their funding of it.
Yeah, from my understanding is Take-Two bought the IP rights to Kerbal, right? But they didn't buy the studio because they didn't want the studio. They just wanted the IP. But they were like, hey, we'll let you keep on working on it. We'll give you contracts to work on it. And then, then they do stuff to make those contracts get delayed, and, making them need more time to work on it, delaying the game, meaning they need longer to work on it, and then they you know what? We're not going to renew your contract. We're canceling your contract. So Kerbal 2 is dead. Except for we're going to continue it over here in our studio and everything. And we're going to take all of the employees that we can get and steal them onto our team. And then you're going to be left with all the debt and everything and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And they go out of business.
Yep. And of course, it's another feather in the cap for Take-Two.
Yep. And I've been saying this for I don't know, the last 3 years, that Take-Two, I think Take-Two is now worse than EA is.
And that's always a good award to get, right?
Yeah, like Take-Two has all the sports games and all the microtransactions and loot boxes that EA does. You know, where, you know, EA had their Star Wars loot box simulator. You know, no, that was Warner Brothers, wasn't it? Which one was it that had the Shadow of Mordor?
EA.
That was Warner Brothers, wasn't it?
Oh wait,
that
yeah, Warner Brothers. I think it was published by EA. Or let me double check that. So I thought EA did have some hand in that. Developed by published by Warner Brothers, developed by Monolith.
Well, what did Take-Two have during that time? They had something that was really atrocious during that time.
Was it an open world game? Was it open world?
I don't remember. I just remember that there was another big atrocity during that time that was from Take-Two. Warner Brothers is up there too. Warner Brothers, I think, might be right under EA kind of thing.
It's hard to keep track of all this here.
Of who's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
3, because they're, you know, continuously trying to outdo themselves. It's very easy to tell who's the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's Capcom and Nintendo.
Yeah.
But Nintendo is going down that bad path. Especially on their mobile side.
Yeah. And all in all games, of course, talking about NBA 2K, which, you know, the horrible monetization model on top of the slot machines, on top of the gacha.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. And there are people who, on YouTube, all they do is make videos about opening up those loot boxes.
Yeah, it's because those get a lot of views. Like, I remember one time I streamed, I think it was Hearthstone. You know, I had never played, and I was trying to, you know, figure out exactly what the deal was with it and everything. And within streaming it, I think for like maybe 30 minutes, somebody came on and it's like, open up a bunch of packs. I was like, I don't have a bunch of packs. Well, go buy some. No. Like, people like seeing packs open because, you know, the developer that way, because they put so much polish in there.
Yep.
And sadly, I'm going to have to do the same thing with Project Triad to be able to have any chance of surviving. But you know, that's kind of where similarities end.
Yeah. I mean, if you look on YouTube, like any mobile or gacha-based game has multiple videos and people who all they do is just open up loot boxes. There's this, like, for some reason it's popping on my feed, there's this Dragon Ball Z mobile game that people love opening these loot boxes for, and I have absolutely no idea what the gameplay of this game is. Like, I've watched people play it, I have no idea what's going on. I think they're just, like, clicking on, like, colored balls, and that's it. But there's an extensive loot box system to it.
Jeez.
No idea what this game is. That's the crazy part. I think it's a Dragon Ball, not Budokai. I think it begins with a D. again, it's great
The
when
only one I'm thinking of is Dragon Ball Heroes.
Oh,
That's not it, is it?
no, there's Dragon Ball Legends, I think. Yeah, oh yeah, there's like
Yeah,
4 or
Dragon Ball
5.
Legends sounds like a mobile game.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 like Dragon Ball mobile based games. I did download
Yeah.
Legends. That they have like the most. You want to talk about expensive loot boxes? Every loot box is basically a fighting scene that they animate out, and then the quality of the fight determines the quality of the loot box, or it shows you what the loot box is going to be.
Jeez.
They probably spend more money on the loot boxes than I think most developers have budgets for.
Yeah. You can tell where their priority is. You know.
And I still want to know how much Capcom spent on those cooking cutscenes in Monster Hunter. I just want to know how.
Those are like loot box quality cooking scenes.
The most delicious food. Like, I'm pretty sure most indie games don't have the budget compare like a 5-second scene of a cat cooking food.
Yeah.
But that is some really.
It's probably not as expensive as you think, but like it was cheap. That's for sure.
Yeah. But that is some really high quality food, though. I'll give them that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, like, you know, that's the kind of thing I would expect out of a loot box right there.
Yeah. Let's see. So, yeah, getting back to Kerbal. Yeah, so the original developer, Squad, I don't know what they're doing. I remember the story being that...
They're filing for bankruptcy.
Well, Squad wasn't developers of Kerbal Space Program 2.
They weren't?
No. It was done by... Star Theory was the developer.
So Star Theory that's filing for bankruptcy then.
Yeah. But yeah, Squad, if I remember the story right, that Kerbal Space Program was just kind of something they were doing in their... Like, they weren't a game developer studio. I think they did something else. And then, like, Kerbal kind of, like, took off, and they didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah. Squad...
Oh. Did we lose Shark? Uh-oh. Test. Uh-oh. We have lost Shark, people. Will his internet come back? Oh. We're still on here, at least. Thank you, Ford. Oh, he watches that part when he checks out the recording. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. We may have to do this. Yeah, we may have to do a backup topics then, because he really wanted to talk about dialogue in games. Maybe as an emergency, we'll do the weird game segment first. See if he comes back, and then we can do topics 1 and 2, one after another. Isn't that the whole plot of Maneater? Oh. Alright, he just disconnected. Oh, wait. I think he's back.
There.
Okay, there we go. He's back.
Yeah, you went silent there, and I was like,
Matthew said Sharp probably went to terrorize a beach somewhere.
I wish. I need to, because I ain't got no internet to surf the web, so I need to surf the real waves and terrorize a beach.
Matthew just said Sharky.exe stopped working.
Yep.
Alright,
It's
but
more like Sharky.phone stopped working.
But I think with that, let's get to our first topic then before any more phone-related shenanigans happens. So, our topics are writing plots and writing characters. So I think probably plots would be the better one to start with, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when for this topic, we're kind of talking about where to begin when it comes to the plot of a game. And depending upon the developer in question, this can either be a very easy answer or a very hard one. Because as we all know, developers will tend to focus on either the mechanics first or the storytelling. But there are, I think one of the things that we've seen from some of the more or higher quality developers is that the two tend to be worked on in concert with each other.
Oftentimes, yeah, but not always.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no right way to start a story.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast over.
There we go.
Roll the credits. But there are many, ways to write a story. There's, again, like you said, there's often times where you come up with the story first, and then you write the game around it and try to design the mechanics around it. That's one I like doing. Is like this isn't what I do all the time, but this is what I like doing. I have a story ready, and then I think about it, and then it's like, how can I portray this in the most accurate, funnest way through mechanics? And then it helps me come up with unique ideas for game mechanics kind of thing. And the other way is I already have something really good mechanically and everything, and now I need to come up with a story and a theme to go with it kind of thing. And I find that one to be honestly harder in a lot of cases, but not all cases kind of thing. I mean, we were with Project Triad to where we had the core mechanics already established and everything, and we were like, okay, we got this really good card game. What kind of story and theme do we go with it? And luckily Project Triad, being a card game, is so open to interpretation that you could literally put pretty much anything on it. So it's like, well, what do we really want to put on it kind of thing? We had basically nearly limitless choices. Where if you're making a platformer or something, you have a very narrow set of choices.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. If you're making a roguelike, again, that narrows down the choices a bit. So like, depending on the genre, to how hard it becomes after that point. But that's something to be wary of, that you're basically limiting the possibilities for the story, based if you do it that way. Now then, the other way to do it is where you come up with either a concept for the story or a concept for the game, and then you work on the concept of the story of the game after that, and then they both develop together kind of thing. Of course, keep in mind that I don't know if this is official terms or anything, but like, this is kind of my definitions. I define it as there's a story and then there's a kind of thing. The story is just telling you overarchingly what is happening, kind of thing. This is, these are the rules of the world. These are, this is the things that are happening in the world. I plan on this person having a tragic death. I plan on having this person become, evil. I plan on this one becoming good. I have this one always being evil, and just kind of listing out, kind of big events that I want to have happen, plot twist I want to have happen, characters I want, and stuff like that. And I put it together in a cohesive manner, but not like anything that I'm going to publish or anything. This is just a, cohesive set of ideas, I guess you would say, story ideas, plot ideas.
Yeah.
And then when I go to the script, I take that story and I have the characters well defined by that point and everything. And then that's when I and take that story and then I write it in every character's perspective as we progress through the script to write these games' actual script story.
And Matthew said that, according to Exocrez, they said that they suggested you do the mechanics first, and then you do the story to kind of facilitate that.
Well, let's see how to say this. I'll say it this way: Extra Credits used to be a really good channel, and they occasionally have content on there now. But I would not take anything they said, especially now, for 100%. That said, that method works, but I find that method to be the harder method to do. But in the end, it's up to the developer to find out what is easiest for them. And I find either doing side by side kind of thing or doing the story first. Not the script, but the story first is easiest kind of thing.
And I'm like I'm trying to fight a sneeze, and it's about to come in a second, and I hope I don't lose my point.
Uh-oh.
We'll see. Oh, they said it with the old host. And again, I think it really depends on the game in question. Because we've seen, again, plenty of titles that are mechanic focused first, and those that are more on the storytelling and story side of things. And I think another major distinction we need to talk about, just hit everything right there with my leg, is the difference between the plot and the world building versus the story itself. So, for instance, like with something like with Borderlands, that, the crazy world of the bandits and, everybody going crazy and the gun manufacturers, that's the plot. But what is happening in the story? What's happening minute by minute in the game? And both are very important, but they both have different aspects of storytelling. And again, this is where we get into the whole argument of Dark Souls. Dark Souls has a fantastic plot, but not that great of a story, admittedly.
Yeah.
And again, go ahead.
The thing is about writing is there's many different ways to put story into your game. There's like full flash dialogue with voice acting. There's cutscenes where you read the dialogue. There's
narration,
lore. There's narration. There's little plot lore kind of thing where like Dark Souls has, where and like Magic the Gathering has like lore on the bottom of their cards. Predator tried will up to. There's what was I going to say? I lost.
Good,
there's many ways to put in story into a game, and now I remember. There's the animated way to put in story, like Ori, because Ori has hardly any dialogue, but oh man, it certainly tells you a story. You know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
And there is a narrator pop in every once in a while, but most of that game doesn't have any dialogue. Most of the story moments in that game does not have dialogue.
Yeah.
And, you tell the story through animation and whatnot. And, of course, there's combinations in between.
And Matthew asks, what's the difference between plot and story? And I think, for my definition, the plot is kind of what is setting up what's happening in the game. So, Doom, the plot would be bad guys open portal to hell, demons come in. The story is what is developing over the course of playing through that game. What is the player being told? What is being relayed to the player about what they're doing at the time of gameplay?
Right. Um, I would, say pretty much the same thing, although I use different terms. The
Mm-hmm.
terms really don't matter. What matters is that it's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing, pretty much. You know, I refer to my plot as story, which is probably inaccurate, but I do put in like plot twist and everything, so it is probably plot. And I'm probably using the wrong term there. And when
Mm-hmm.
I say story, I'm referring or script, I'm referring to the actual script of every dialogue that's being said in the game. And any kind of there's parts of the script that shows animated kind of story in there too.
Mm-hmm.
Like this character moves from here, this character plays death animation, this kind of thing. Like everything that needs to be programmed into our dialogue, into our cutscene system, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
is what's in our script and what I call our script. And
Mm-hmm.
then everything else, all the planning stuff, all the things, the core building blocks, all the plot twist, all the character development, all of that is what I call the story. But it would probably be more accurate to call it the plot. But I'm probably not going to
And
be able
to
to nail that into my head in this podcast.
to Matthew's follow up. So the plot is a synopsis. And yeah, kind of. Again, it's what is setting up before the player arrives. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing OBS is giving me all the warning flags. So hopefully we're not breaking up too badly right now. So
Mm-mm.
so here's another way to think about it. Blizzard's games are often really good with plot as well, but aren't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the best with story. So
Right.
look at something like Diablo. If you read the manuals for Diablo 1 and 2, there's a good 15-20 pages of lore about everything sets up, how Diablo came to be, the primevals, the soul stones, all that great stuff. And then when you play the game, you are just walking around procedurally generated environments hitting things with a giant sword or throwing a spell at them.
You know, and there's no story there
And,
other than go to X location and kill this evil person.
yeah. And when they've tried to do stories, and this is probably if we come back to storytelling, we should probably do something about bringing the character into the story. That the problem with something like with Diablo is that your character, the character in of itself, is not important to the story. As in, they technically don't really have any stakes. They're there, but again, you can replace that character with any other character class. The same thing with Borderlands, or any game that lets you kind of create your own character. They themselves aren't really central to the story, so they're not really part of the plot. The exception to that
Well,
rule.
most of them are.
What was that?
I said most of them are like that
Yeah, and
because that's the easy shortcut around writing for a game like that.
hmm and the exceptions would be stuff like in the Mass Effect series, where you are creating a custom character, but that character still has their own personality to them.
Hmm.
They are actively driving the plot, and by proxy, the player is driving the plot. In Diablo, again, it doesn't matter what you do; you're still just killing every demon that you see.
Yeah, and this is kind of the difference between a game with that's not story focused to one that is story focused. If
hmm
if you're building a game that's story focused, your character has to be involved with moving around the plot
hmm
because otherwise nobody's going to enjoy it. But if your game is not story focused, I mean, you can get away with not doing that kind of thing.
hmm
And of course, there is a way to give you custom characters and let you drive the plot. And, that's a much harder way kind of thing. And, there's a method that I have kind of knocking around in my head to really kind of do that kind of thing. And that's where you 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 get several different voice actors, both male and female, several of each, and you write out several different personalities, and you end up writing the script several times, basically, one for for each personality kind of thing. Let the player pick the personality and give them a good idea of what the personality is going to be, not just one or two lines kind of thing. Just like let them know what that personality is going to be about, not just how they're going to react to things or how they're going to scream. Yeah, because that's what we see a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then give them several different baseline characters, and then let them, maybe 8 kind of baselines, and then let them customize them. Not full customization, but I don't know, 70% customization maybe, and let them customize their character and that voice and everything, that personality rather, and the personality and the voice will come together, kind of thing. And let them do it that way. And I mean that's going to be a lot of work and very hard to pull off, kind of thing, and quite expensive, because you'll have to hire multiple voice actors for the one player character.
Oh yes.
At the same time, you're giving you experience, because like if the story is different every time you play around with different personality of your character, you can play through that game. Let's just say they have 10 different personalities, kind of thing. You can play that game 10 times, and it'd be a new experience every time.
And you're writing 10 games worth of dialogue.
Well, not necessarily 10 games. Probably more like four or five if you're doing it right, kind of thing, because you're not writing any of the NPCs unless you put in a flag there that if there's one is really aggressive and everything, and he pushes the guy aside and he says, no, you do this, then they react to that kind of thing. But besides those few occasions that you would put in there like that, you would pretty much have the same NPC dialogue throughout the game for the most part. So you would only be writing the main characters, and anybody that main, in the main, if you're doing an RPG that has, 5 or 6 characters in it, kind of thing, then you're going to have to change up their script a little bit, but not completely.
Yeah, like the NPCs you shouldn't be changing, and like we've seen this a lot in RPGs and titles that allow for like custom characters, where the NPC will say something, and the only thing that is really the NPC's dialogue remains the same. The only thing that changes is what your character says. Maybe one character says something like, this sounds amazing, or this one's like, oh, I don't want to do this, and the NPC just continues like, the main character didn't say anything.
Well, you that is a way, but that's kind of a cheap way.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be good in certain circumstances, but you wouldn't want to do that all throughout the game, kind of thing.
Yeah, like we saw that with Borderlands being, I think, a really good example of that.
You would want to put in there, actually, have the NPCs, at least to a certain point, react to what you say, as long as it needs reacting to. Like if you're like, if one character's like, yeah, that sounds good, and the other character's like, we can do that. You could give them the same dialogue. It's not really going to, they're not going to really react different to that. But if you have another character that slams his fist down on the table and says, no, kind of thing, like, the NPC better act different, or else
he better say,
feel really bad.
Yeah. Now, Matthew asked, does that include the avatar from Sonic Forces, as we were talking about earlier with, I think, character writing? And I didn't play Sonic Forces, did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, there is one topic that I know we haven't discussed yet when we talk about like story and character and writing in games. I want to bring up. So we've talked about again or earlier about that distinction between starting with your mechanics and writing a story versus starting with a story and then coming up with the mechanics. So my question for you, Shark, is this, because I know somebody is wondering this. I don't know, Matthew. I don't think anyone else is asking questions, although it is open. But here's my question. Let's say we do begin with mechanics. Let's say, I don't know, let's say that we've developed the ability to do, I don't know, let's say we do teleport jumps. Let's say we've coded our game and we have built that the main mechanics on the character can teleport around. That is literally all we have right now. And the next thing that comes to mind is coming up with a story. So, how, like, from a design standpoint, I guess design/writing, can you go from I have a cool mechanic to I have a cool mechanic and there's a story that revolves around it?
Yeah, you can. It's harder to do in most cases, but it's also easier to do in most cases. It's safely extreme. It's both easier and harder. It's easier because you're limited, so there's only so many things it can be. But that also makes it harder because if you cannot one of those certain things that you like, then you might be on that for a while, kind of thing. Like, the thing that comes to my mind is like a robot. If you had a robot, could teleport, kind of thing. Or you could even do an alien. There's, you could even do a character that had, if the mechanic was able to be doctored, kind of thing, you could do a character that has this little wristwatch or something, and they hit that wristwatch and they're able to teleport. I mean, like, there's many ways to do it. But, it can be hard because you already have that hard mechanic there, and that limits your choices.
Yeah.
But it can also be easy because of the limited choices, depending on, your current idea, basically, to if it's easy or hard.
And we all
now then, way around with the story first, and this is the way I really prefer, is when I have the story first. I know the story I want to tell, and hey, I have a story that I wrote that does have dimensional portals, kind of thing. And now that I know that, it's like, what kind of mechanics can I wrap around that, kind of thing? And, I didn't want to make mechanics around actually teleporting, but rather what I did is that was a good way to basically essentially a loading screen of sorts to go between one world to another, kind of thing. It was but there's other ways, like like if I wanted a story that involved guns that teleported, I could write a very mechanically heavy game called Portal. There's so many ways that a story can shape a game into unique mechanics. There's not really any way that the mechanics can shape the story into being unique, because I mean, the story is either going to be, I don't know, like, but again, I think that all this applies differently depending on the developer that's making the game, because if the developer has a strong story writer, I would definitely suggest probably going with the story first, kind of thing. Where if the game has a great game designer, maybe go with the mechanics first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm sitting here, story writer and designer, and those are like my top two kind of thing, and always work for me. And those two together, I think, are so valuable because they interact so much with each other, and they can combine to each other to build up each other so well, kind of thing. Of course, that said, if you write a story about some generic fantasy world kind of thing, you are to a point limiting your mechanics at the same time on that. So,
and like I said last time, we were playing a quadrilateral cowboy. One thing that I do like is when the mechanics of the game are kind of referenced or understood by the story. Like in that one, they have things like, instead of just saying why you can zoom in and out, they give you have like a box that says, zoom in to 0.3 glasses, press Z to zoom in. Or, they're trying to bring the mechanics into the world itself.
Yeah, I like doing that myself.
And hopefully I won't butcher this too much. Prithvi Das also brought up Portal at the same time you were talking about. That Portal is a great example of, we have a really weird and cool mechanic. How do we fit this into this world? And they came with this idea of, well, you're going to test this device. And then testing led to an AI. And AI led to GLaDOS. But I think part of the problem, and I think this is a challenge we see developers face, is that when you do focus on mechanics first, it does, I think, become harder to tell a long-form plot around that. And when I say long-form, I mean we're talking like a multi-game series. Because most games are not built under the assumption you're going to make game 2, 3, 4, and 5 in that series.
But stories can very well be made into that. Because it's like, oh, I have, like, I wrote this, like, 200,000 page script. Oh, crap, there's no way I can make a game this big. Okay, let's see here. At this point, there's this big fight, this big epic fight. We can make that game 1. There's another fight here. We can make this game 2. There's another huge fight here. We can make that game 3. There's another huge fight here. That can be game 4. And then here's the final fight, and that's game 5.
Yeah, but if you remember that game, Advent Rising, I think it was written by, what was his name, Orson Scott Card or something like that. They definitely had their eyes aimed for the moon and the stars of that story. It's going to be, this multi-tailed space opera where, every decision matters and all those other buzzwords that developers and publishers like to say. And none of it happened. There was, I think, literally one choice in that entire game that actually mattered. Nothing else did. It ends with a major plot twist that will never get resolved, and it's now to the annals of history.
Yeah, I hate choices that don't matter. Like, there wasn't very many choices in our last game, the word of the day, Chromasia, but every one that was in there mattered. There was one actual dialogue choice, and the other choices were, choosing to lose or choosing to win based off of, how you performed in combat.
And Ford asked, how do we make dialogue trees with meaningful dialogue choices work? And as he said,
there's many ways.
Yeah, it is very hard to do that properly.
Well, I mean, the concept is easy. I mean, like, there's a few different concepts. And, and you have to do this in such a way that it does not cause you too much work. One method is, I don't know what the name for it, I just call it the branch method personally. And that's where you basically have your story come up to the decision, and then it wise off into 2 branches. You could technically do more than 2 branches, but I'm just giving the example of A and B, choice A and B. And then let's just say that choice is, do you kill this character or do you not kill him, or do you help this character or not help him, whichever way you want to consider it. Do you do something for this character, or do you do something against this character? And then after that, you carry out that action, and then the branches come back together, kind of thing. And then you continue that linear story, and you're like, well, your choice didn't matter. Well, at some point later, it could be, 10 minutes later, it could be 1 minute later, kind of thing. It could be 10 hours later in the game. But if you're 10 hours, make sure there's tons of choices in there and not just this one, because that's going to, your players are going to be mad about that. if they didn't expect all the choices to actually have long-term meaningful consequences. You get to the point over there, and you run into somebody else, and this splits into another Y kind of thing. And you got 2 branches, but this time you don't make a choice because your choice has already been made for you earlier. If you say you help the guy, you run into his friend, and if you help the guy, then that friend is like, oh, looking for a map for the thing. Well, I have it right here. You helped out my friend, so I'll help you out. And you are the item.
Yeah.
Where, let's say you killed him, he's going to be like, oh, no, get the heck out of my house. And then you're going to have to go through a long process to either try to steal that map or try to get a map some other way in a whole nother quest because you made that choice earlier.
Yeah.
And that's a choice that matters. And then, after you get the map, the paths converge again, and you're back on a linear storyline. So you have, one branch where you make the choice, and, a branch later on at some point where, it mattered, kind of thing. And that branch later on could be, again, 2 seconds later, it could be 10 minutes later, it could be 10 hours later.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, that's just one method. Another method is the kind of modular stories, to where you take and you have, like, okay, here's this quest, and this quest is going to branch out like several times and not ever branch back together, kind of thing. But at the end of it, you get either some kind of reward, some kind of recording, kind of thing, like this has affected your character in this way. Your character is now, has a scar across his eye, or your character now wears, a suit of armor that's gold colored, or whatever it is. And that just, that whatever your reward / consequence of that storyline, affects gear or appearance or whatever of your character from that point forward, and then that module is just kind of thrown away, kind of thing. And then you just go from module to module, kind of thing. And you probably have some core framework that will allow you to basically explore a map or whatever and find these modules along the way. And that way you tons of choice, all of it matter, but never really have any kind of negatives from that. It's just, but it that kind of storytelling, though, is less personal for the most part. Not saying you can't make a personal of that, but it, generally is less personal.
Yeah. And Chris said, like, would you describe that as a self-contained story? And I think he guess, yeah, so like that modular would be a good way of putting it. That like each chunk of the story doesn't necessarily affect everything around it. It just affects those aspects that are part of that story chain.
Yeah, basically. It's basically little mini stories that are probably only 2 minutes to 5 minutes long, kind of thing, generally.
Let's see. Matthew...
some kind of permanent consequence from that story.
Let's see. Matthew asks, what are your thoughts on multiple endings in games? And
I love them, but you got to do them right.
Yeah. They're very... Especially, again
Go ahead.
What I was going to say, especially if you're again trying to plan out multiple games in your franchise, because every ending that you write, you have to have that as a viable starting point in the next game. Because if you don't, as we saw with some games like Mass Effect, which ended after all those choices that didn't matter, people are very defensive for obvious reasons of the choices they make because they're trying to build or they want the story that they kind of wrote for themselves. They don't want you to say, "Oh, all those choices you made, yeah, just ignore them. We're going to tell this story."
And there's a easy way to kind of cheap out on that. This I would kind of probably suggest for newer developers, kind of getting their feet wet, kind of thing, is have like a lot of your endings be dead ends. Have them, but this only works to have like some kind of new game plus system or something like that. But if you have some kind of new game plus system, you can have that they lost to a boss, and because they lost to that boss, this consequences apply, and your characters are dead. And then you go into new game plus, you start over with with hopefully without losing any progress or very very minimal progress, and you go through and get you another storyline kind of thing. That's an easy way to the multiple endings. Just have them dead end. You could have them into a positive thing too. You can have them dead into, oh, you happen to beat this boss, which you beat him, and he was actually the boss of the game. The real boss, because he wasn't the strong boss. He was the man behind the curtain kind of thing, manipulating thing. He was the brain, and the brawn was, far up, far harder to beat. But once you beat the brain behind the organization, the brawn just kind of collapsed on his own kind of thing. like there's many ways to do that kind of thing cheaply, but if you're going to end the game with that kind of thing, make sure that you're either not going to make another game, or that somehow you can incorporate every path that you left open into the new game, which is hard. It's because the more paths you have, the more work it is.
It reminds me.
Ideally want to end on that one note, unless there's not going to be anything else after this.
It reminds me of a joke they did on the cartoon Phineas and Ferb, like during its heyday, where they ended an episode with like all these various teasers of an episode that they had no intention of writing, and then they made the joke, well, people loved it so much, now we have to figure out how to put all those scenes together into a coherent story now. We got one.
Yeah.
I think we'll do one more question, then we'll move on to weird games, and then we'll talk more about character dialogue or character design, character writing after that. Pruth V said this: do you feel it is necessary to make sure the mechanics and the story blend together well for it to make for a good story-based game? Some people think that if they don't, then it'll be mediocre. So I think what they're saying is that should the mechanics kind of facilitate the story that's going on? And I think some examples that we could kind of bring in here would be games like Gone Home, What Remains of Edith Finch, that Where the Water Tastes Like Wine, where the mechanics themselves aren't really in service of the story, in the sense that what you're doing from a gameplay point of view is not really driving the story of those games. It's getting you to the story beats, but this emotional story is not being told because I do a match 3 or I solve a Towers of Hanoi puzzle.
Yeah, I don't think it's required to mesh together, but I think the better it meshes together, the better the story and the gameplay mesh together, the better your game will be in the end. Because like all those games you just mentioned, I don't like any of them, and I really like story games. I'm a huge RPG fan. Who would have guessed? After
No, not me.
after making some.
And I think, and to a Chris's point, that the story can really drive mechanics. And like what we see
Yeah.
is that when the story and mechanics are kind of firing on all cylinders like that, it does elevate a game, I think, in really great ways.
hmm You
Like,
really, I think you need the story and the gameplay to mesh well together, as well as the music mesh well together with both of those,
mhm.
as well as the mechanics meshing well with both of those, as well as the art meshing with those. And if you can get everything just perfectly meshed together and they're all good, you will probably have one of the best games of all times.
Like again, like when you look at something like Prey 2016 by Arcane, that is a really great example of how story and world interact with mechanics and vice versa.
hmm I
And
haven't played that one, so I don't know.
and again, it is a lot harder than what Shark described there. And it's why
hmm
for a lot of developers they tend to focus on one or the other. I'm going to tell a very emotionally driven story, and it's all done by matching tiles as my game mechanic. Or I'm going to create this incredibly complicated game, and then the story is you got to save the princess from a castle.
Yeah. And I think that's less them choosing to focus on that and more that's where their strong suit is,
Yep.
and they lack in the other departments, and they're not hiring people to fill those other departments. And that's why we've said many times being a solo developer is not the best way to go. That's
Mm-hmm.
you can be a solo developer. It's possible, but if you're a solo developer, you're your odds of failing are so much higher, and your odds of making anything good are also so much lower.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the issue, because like we don't have any omni talented people kind of thing. Like the closest thing we have to omni talented people is Mr. Concerned Ape there with Stardew Valley, and he's not good with marketing. He outsourced his marketing. Had what was it the
Uh,
goldfish or
Chucklefish. Fish.
chucklefish? Yeah, chucklefish. Publish it. So an omni talented. I mean, he's pretty close. But I mean, he's a dang good artist. He's a dang good programmer. He's really good with game design, really good with writing and everything. Like he's, but like that's one guy. Name somebody else like him.
Yeah.
That's nobody. Uh, you know, and that's kind of the issue. Kind of thing with solo development. Is you can't max out everything like that. You can't make the best game in every way that way, and that's why you really need a team. Now when you're starting out and everything, learning and everything, like keep it as a hobby. Learn on your own and do it solo. But when you're going to go make a professional product and everything that you're going to sell, you pretty much need a team. Not going to say there's a 100% rule on that, but there's a 99.9%, probably even higher than that, rule on that.
All right. But I think with that, let's do our weird game segment, and then we'll talk more about character dialogue. So this is going to be a challenging one, as Shark can't see the games.
Nope.
So
And
this will be the
I
week of
have
old
no idea
weirdness.
yeah, and I will have no idea what you're referencing.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure we'll have some amazing games this week that Shark can't see. Let
some
me.
amazing names that you can't say. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you'll be like, well, what about this name? What name?
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it.
Yeah.
Well, then what good that does me.
All right. So let's see. So this first one, Agents Biohunters. That I was looking at the screenshots of this, and to me, this looks generic as hell for the people watching this. It has that, Fortnite Dauntless, very, like the graphics look good, but the aesthetics have like that very basic cartoon look to them.
So basically, it feels like they're lacking style.
Yeah.
They have the graphical horsepower. They lack the style, though, and style is always over horsepower because
Mm-hmm.
you can make something that is just two colors and just pixels kind of thing and just make something that is absolutely stylish and amazing
Yeah.
that 20 years from now people will still say looks holds up where you make something out of horsepower, even something, like you look at any Call of Duty that ever came out pretty much had pretty amazing graphics the day it came out. You look at any of them, from like years ago, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they don't hold up.
Nope.
Heck,
Yep.
if you look 6 months after it released, it doesn't hold up.
Mm-hmm. So here's a game, Heretic's Lot. It's a prologue, and I love this description. It's an unusual combination of several game genres. It is a puzzle game mixed with RPG and a roguelike, all at once. And the best part is that one of the key features is familiarize yourself with the basic mechanics of the main game. That's a feature of playing this game. Try to figure out what the game is.
Yeah, there's so many red flags in that.
And the genre is free to play indie.
Yeah.
So this game, it definitely has an aesthetic. They're going for that kind of like voxel look, something like a Stonehearth. But
Hmm.
I have absolutely no idea what this gameplay is. I'm looking at these screenshots and I'm assuming we have to move this character around to perform certain tasks. But again, the problem with puzzle games is that it's very hard in screenshots to tell somebody, what you're trying to do.
Well, you failed to realize that that's one of the mechanics of the game. Is
Mm-hmm.
you have to play the game to figure out what is actually how the game actually works.
So this is that Tainted Grail game that it looks like this one has a really good aesthetic here. It is a blend of, let's see, it is a hardcore roguelike experience with base building mechanics and a narrative on top of that. And
Hmm.
it was a Kickstarter. Oh, it was based off of a board game that was a Kickstarter in 2018. And it looks really amazing. And unfortunately, they completely rejected my key. And that doesn't
Mm-mm.
happen too often. Like usually they'll just ignore it. But I actually got a no from them. So I don't know
Yeah.
what that means. Usually when a developer says no, it may mean that there's something wrong with that game that they don't want me to look at. But we shall
I don't think
see.
so. I don't think so because like I know that I was basically told not to, generally not to say no kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I said no to some of them. But like, I said no to this Call of Duty, streamer, player that only played Call of Duty. It's like, yeah, he's never going to ever show my tactical RPG on his show. So no, you're not getting a free key.
So here we have Elteria Adventures, which the description says it fuses together several game genres, but doesn't tell you what those game genres are. It is an action adventure early
Yeah.
access, free to play, indie, massively multiplayer RPG, according to the genre.
So they just cobbled up a whole bunch of mechanics and put them together, and it's probably a mess.
Visual novel for X grand strategy, sliding box match 3 game.
Oh, that sounds like a train wreck.
Again, a game that graphically it looks good, but the aesthetics just look like every generic fantasy-based game. And I swear, like, when you watch this recorded, Shark, I want you to look at
Hmm.
this screenshot of a skeleton, like, in the snow. This looks like a Warcraft model right here to me, and I don't know why.
Hmm.
Let's see. Skell Attack. I think that's the one that people are telling me to pick up. And let's see. Unique action platformer. Ooh, extensive checkpoint system. So this one just came
Extensive checkpoint system.
extensive.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
like a real good mechanic to list on your front page.
So Those Who Remain. It's a horror game, and it looks like it's built on similar lighting mechanics as Alan Wake.
Mm.
Don't know it will be any good, but I put in a key for it, and it has multiple endings. Multiple different endings. I'm sorry, I have to get the quote right.
Well, if they're putting different in there for their endings, that's a red flag. If they're putting in extensive checkpoint system on their main page, that's a real red flag. Like my hopes are very very low for that game.
So here's a game, Unknown Ways. And this is a good example of good aesthetic, bad store description. So, it is a game about finding your way out of the miserable world which we live in and understanding that none of it makes sense. We are all just meatbags walking around and destroying something that took millions of years to create itself. Oh, and this game has a killer soundtrack also. Like,
Yeah, that's
these
and does not jump off
screenshots
the page.
look, they have a very distinct aesthetic to them, but I have no idea what this gameplay is. Is this an action game? Is it an adventure game? Who knows?
Well, here's the question: do they have any UI in their screenshots?
No, none whatsoever.
See, and that's the thing we were talking about before about you want UI in your screenshots so that people can tell what kind of game it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because and also like you don't want to do like 15 different genres for your game. You only want to do the genres that it needs, which is usually just one. You know, sometimes two, sometimes three, but usually just one. Because you don't want to you don't want to make a unique game just based on you cobbled a whole bunch of mechanics together that don't fit together.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be a unique because you did something and you did it good. Mm-hmm. Don't be unique for the sake of being unique. Well, nothing's truly unique, but you know what I mean. Don't try to be an original game just by cobbling a whole bunch of stuff together. Like you need to, you can, you could take one of the tried and true genres and just do that single genre and make a very very original game. It won't be unique, but it'll be original.
And speaking about original, we have Edge of Dreams, a first-person action, not first-person shooter, first-person action with roguelike elements. And the features...
I think all the screenshots have you holding guns.
Mm-hmm. Features action with elements of roguelike, randomly generated locations, skill system for replayability.
How does the skill system give you replayability?
I don't know.
Is it you're going to fail if you don't have the skill, so go back and try again with the skill?
The screenshot, or this little GIF, kind of concerns me because there's a huge bar of symbols with numbers that I have no idea what it's supposed to be. Are these items I can use? Is it resources on the map? The gunplay looks very generic too. Let's see.
Yeah, a lot of things sounding very generic about that.
What is this? Looks like it's an adventure game. Inspired by Golden Age adventure games. Okay. Uh, this one looks like it has a very generic aesthetic to it.
Mm-mm.
And it's an
Looks like the
adventure.
Death Library.
A hand with many fingers. Let's see.
Graphical style or aesthetics is like so crucial to your games having a chance at succeeding in today's market, because if you don't have the style, then the graphical aesthetics, then you're almost guaranteed to fail, no matter how amazing the game is.
And Chris said,
At
"Why?"
least in the current market.
Chris said, "Why do AAA companies so often not include UI in their screenshots?" I think it's kind of because of the fact that these games are so well known that you kind of already know beforehand, what you're getting into.
Yeah, no, everybody knows what Call of Duty is. Everybody knows what Final Fantasy is, pretty much. Everybody knows what Mario is. Everybody already knows all this. A lot of them define the genre or the lead spotlight for the genre kind of thing. Everybody knows what kind of gameplay Fortnite has and PUBG and all of this. They don't need to describe it. For your normal indies kind of thing, that especially ones that have not been discovered and don't have a fan base of probably 100,000 kind of thing. Yeah, if they don't have UI on their screenshot, ain't nobody going to be able to tell what that game does, pretty much. Especially with how much indies like experimenting with unique mechanics.
Yeah.
And
Hello,
unique aesthetic.
Ionic. Thanks for coming on and finding the stream too. It's always hard to tell when these streams get promoted by YouTube. Here's a game.
Promoted?
I think it did, but who knows? With the algorithm.
We're getting promoted on the worst day when my mic is when my
course.
computer's down and I can't use my mic and
Yeah. This is when we get 500 people watching, right?
Exactly.
Here's a game, Isle of Spirits. It looks like somebody's trying to kind of rip off or play off of Don't Starve. It is a chill and casual survival game in which you're stranded on a desert, procedurally generated isle. And the UI, you can see down here in the bottom left, you have health, hunger, probably tiredness, and temperature. So that seems very much out of Don't Starve. But
well, that's more generic. That's just survival game in general.
And I love
I mean, their UI design might be like Don't Starve. I don't know that, but
and I love this feature. Let's see how many red flags this brings up. This game will not explicitly explain you anything, but you will quickly discover the rules by yourself. Trust the isle. It will not let you quiet for a very long time.
Well, there is a lot of red flags in there. It's like, hey, we didn't put a tutorial in there. Have fun.
I think for me, Chris,
skill
trees, it depends on... I do get a little bit excited about them, but I think it really depends on what's going to be on them. Because there's a whole... That's a topic right there about skill trees and perk design, etc., etc.
Are we talking about screenshots of that, or are we talking about just the mechanics kind of thing?
He's talking about screenshots, but I'm thinking about, mechanic-wise myself. So...
I mean, if you have a big skill tree kind of thing, you probably want to have a screenshot of that.
So, I kept on this page for one specific reason, because I want to see how good my game dev sense is. So this game right here, Persian Nights 2, The Moonlight Veil, the thumbnail looks well done. It seems to have some quality to it, but I bet you this is just a match 3 game, because it follows that very same trend. I just want to see if I'm right on this. Oh, no. It's a hidden object game. Oh, it's done by Harfix Mundi. I had 50-50 shot. It was either a match 3 or a hidden object game.
Yeah, because hidden object games usually do the same thing that match 3 games do.
Yeah. I'm going to put a press key for this because I always like Harfix Mundi games myself. And maybe someday we'll get them on for a cast. Oh, perfect, Shark. Here's one for you in terms of naming your game. This game is called Untitled Video Game.
Oh, they're trying to copy Untitled Goose Game.
Oh, good. And it looks like an RPG Maker kind of game.
Ew. Let me just call. How about we call it Untitled Game Development Stream?
Oh, and I love one of the descriptions is it's a parody of Souls-likes, walking sim, stealth, JRPG, puzzle, battle royale, etc. games. So I'm sure the humor is going to be very ham-fisted and cringy.
Yeah, probably extremely cringy, and probably doesn't even make any sense either.
I don't think it's safely extreme, right?
No, I think that's more extremely bad.
Oh, that main assembly game that we looked at on stream a few weeks ago is going to be coming out, I think, this week.
I don't remember that one.
That was the one you build a car and you can also program the logic of like the car itself. It was one that I failed. Like the programming, like how it controls and behaves.
Oh, you're talking about the where you craft a car and then you have to craft out the how each module kind of controls on the mechanics of the car.
Yeah.
You're talking about like I'm forgetting the name of it. There's one sort of like that was well, I meant scrapyard mechanics like that now that I think about it too. But scrapyard mechanics is more than vehicles kind of thing. But I think I know the one you're talking about, the one that's just vehicles and you drive from point A to point B.
Yeah, the one that I was terrible at, but I could see a lot of people really enjoying it. Now, speaking about a game that I don't think a lot of people are going to enjoy, there is Coronavirus Battlegrounds, Coronavirus News. That's the name of the game.
Oh, they certainly got a lot of Corona in there.
And then there's Epic Dumpster Bear 2, He Who Bears Wins. I have no...
That's a good one.
That is a name, alright. Now I gotta see what this game is. I'm afraid... What the hell?
No, that doesn't sound good.
Oh, you're kind of... This is probably a good thing that you don't have a... You can't see this right now.
Probably.
Oh, my God.
Sounds like they nailed the name and literally nothing else.
Wait, I think I looked at this game already. Sky Hill. Oh, Journey's coming to the PC. That's interesting. Ancestors Legacy. What? Oh, real-time strategy. I think we looked at that one. And let's see.
Sounds familiar.
Proofy asks, what makes for a game with good humor? Why would Shower with Your Daddy Simulator we see so many good reviews while most games that parody numerous themes wouldn't?
Well, you have to have good jokes in there. And since I do a lot of writing and everything, I write a lot of jokes in my game. The best way that I've learned to test out my jokes and everything is not necessarily I do those exact jokes, but I just joke around all the time pretty much. And I'm always joking around and trolling Josh on the streams. Have you ever watched the normal streams? And everything, and I'm always criticizing him in different ways to make it funny. And I figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then I take that knowledge and from doing it, and I apply that when I write my jokes and everything, and and then afterwards, before I even put them in the game, I have other people go over my script and everything, and I listen to their reactions, kind of thing, and see if they like things and whatnot, and if they do, I'm golden. If they don't, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board, kind of thing.
All right.
All of game is about iteration. Iteration. Nothing ever starts off finished, kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'll make this jumping mechanic. Oh, that's finished. Let's move on to the next thing. No, you probably need to go back and tweak and tune that jumping mechanic. Maybe add 15 other types of jumping mechanics to the game. And tweaking all them.
So here we got a game, Beyond Blue. Single-player narrative adventure that has you, I guess, it looks like you're diving around the world looking at sea creatures. Apparently it has a famous voice cast. I don't recognize any of the names. And there's sharks in this one. But I don't think the sharks can actually eat you.
I mean, sharks normally don't eat people.
Let's see. This will be
normally pretty non-violent.
Alright, this will be our last page here. Logisticals getting another update. Eldritch University. Let's see. What is this? What the hell? Overshadow. I have no idea what... Oh, it's a 4-player party game, but I have no idea what it is that you're doing in this game. Apparently, I think this...
There's a 4-player party game, and you don't even know what kind of party they're throwing.
Yeah. Apparently, I think this was a DigiPen game, because it was published by DigiPen Institute of Technology. So it sounds like this was a game jam or a student project that they're trying to make as a full game.
Yeah. And, game jams and student projects rarely ever pan out into a good game.
Alright. But I think with
they do sometimes.
Let's spend a few minutes. We got maybe like a good 20-30 minutes, and let's talk a little bit more about writing for games. And this time we're focusing on dialogue or character writing. Because if coming up with the plot of your game can be tricky, trying to fill all those lovely characters with meaningful dialogue can also be a kind of a pain.
Oh yeah. And I'm unsure if there's any really hard rules on that kind of thing. Like, it's a very hard thing to kind of explain.
Mm-hmm.
You want the character's personality to fit the character art, number one.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they fit? That is something entirely different. Most of them fit in a way that, oh yeah, this kind of personality kind of thing, this kind of, character, yeah, I see this being, this blonde girl here. Or I see this character personality and this, everything being this, guy over here with, all these tattoos kind of thing. But at the same time, you can do something completely off the wall if you intend on it, kind of thing. Like the perfect example of this is not an entire perfect example, but it's a very, very perfect. It's as close to a perfect example I can come to right here, and that's off of the cartoon, the old cartoon, and I don't know if it's still running or not. Venture Brothers, where they had Dr. Girlfriend, who Dr. Girlfriend was this little petite girl with black hair, pretty cute and everything. She doesn't look like a supervillain, but she is a supervillain, and she's got a really good figure on her. But her voice is as burly and manly as possible, kind of thing, and it just knocks you off your feet. You're like, what? But you have to have a story built around that, and that is a forever comic moment about that cartoon, that anytime she comes on screen, it's just hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And from the description itself, or from the thumbnail I posted, I put up an image of a tiny Tina from Borderlands, and Borderlands, I think, has always had kind of like hit or miss with their character writings. What do you think? Uh-oh. Did we lose Shark again? Oh. I think we lost Shark again. Alright. We'll give him a minute to come back. So we're talking about writing character dialogue for games and some of the challenges of that. And while you were gone, looks like Shark left as well. But when you're trying to do dialogue for games, as he was saying, it's very tricky to write a character that is kind of fitting to the world itself, and at the same time the dialogue seems natural. Because as we've seen from a lot of RPG based games, typically dialogue is written very one-sided. Character says something, the other character response could be in a completely different way, and I can't think, at least on the top of my mind, of games that really do like a conversation of a dialogue well. Maybe Rockstar could be close in that regard. And when you're trying to like build this world, you always run that risk of just how much do these characters stand out. Like with Borderlands and like with someone like Tiny Tina, like she stands out in a good way in the fact that she fits that theme and setting perfectly. Then we see developers who will put in a character who purposely kind of breaks the fourth wall. They may use slang that doesn't fit the setting, or they'll talk about the fact that they know they're in a video game, like the Deadpool-esque character. And I feel like you gotta be really careful with that. Waiting for a reader. Yeah. Well, I think part of the challenge with that, Ford, is the fact that dialogue in a game has to, facilitate the game itself. Like in a game, or I'm sorry, in a book or in a movie, characters can talk and, it can just service, what's going on in that scene. In a video game, the player is the one who's active. Like, if a character just has a dialogue, like a 20-minute discussion about the proper way to, I don't know, cook turnips, and the player is trying to play a hardcore ARPG, it's not really going to do anything. What I mean by that, Matthew, is that the character is purposely written to break the fourth wall, or as, your pop culture character. So, like, we've seen some games will do that. Sometimes they'll do it as a parody. They'll have a character who it's a fantasy world, but this character is specifically the bro, or, the beach bully kind of design. Doesn't have anything to do with the game itself. He's just there to kind of be a reference to that. And Shark is still not back. Every time I go ask Shark something, he loses his connection. And when you're trying, and this becomes especially difficult if you're trying to do an RPG where you're having NPCs in the dozens, if not hundreds, kind of filling up cities and roles. And oftentimes what we'll see some developers do is just kind of make them as generic as possible. And kind of just fit them to be just simply, answer vendors. You go up to somebody, like if you remember the classic game Shenmue, and that scene where Ryu just has to wander around asking people, do you know where sailors hang out? Which I actually picked up Shenmue off of one of the bundles, so we could certainly relive that, a moment of amazing storytelling right there. And the more NPCs and more characters you have in your world, it becomes harder to make that work unless you go for very generic discussions. In the Yakuza games, they'll have characters who you can talk to who simply are there to either be nonsensical in their response, or they'll give you some idea. Like if you're searching for a guy who ran into a crowd, maybe people will say, oh, this guy, brushed up against me, or he knocked me down. I am error, yeah. Yep. And some games will try and flesh them out, like Chris saying with Octopath Traveler. We of course have the Dark Souls idea, where old discussions, old character traits, and all that are on the items that they wear. So the character that you're fighting will not say anything, but then when you kill them, you take all their clothing, you'll learn their deep and exhaustive backstory. Oh, my voice is dying. Let's see. I hope Shark hasn't been talking this whole time and and hasn't realized his internet went out. And I guess for... Oh, wait. I think I hear him coming back.
Uh-oh.
There we go.
I've been sitting here talking for the...
I just said that, people. I just said that Shark probably didn't realize he isn't talking. Or we can't hear him. He's just been having a conversation with himself.
Yeah. It's exactly what happened. So where do I leave off on that story?
Don't know. I said something. I said, "What did you think, Shark?" And then we didn't hear anything else.
Oh no! Did he cut out my entire story?
Yeah, we didn't hear a damn thing. There's your dialogue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me tell that whole spill all over again, but I'll try to make it shorter this time because it was probably a good 5-10 minutes. Anyway, so you want to have a range of emotion in your game. You know, we'll go back to the word of the day, chromasia, and so in it, you know, it's a very dark story, but it has comedic moments. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that's a dark comedy." No, it's not a dark comedy. The darkness is not humorous. The darkness is dark, and the humorous is humorous. It's completely separate. You know, we just have one character that is really dumb, stupid, and absolutely hilarious, who says the dumbest, craziest, funniest things in your travels along this very, very dark story. And it really, it brings up the story kind of thing. It makes it high point and you have the low point. If you were to give stuff, a value kind of thing, let's say that you have somebody who, we're going to refer to real life here, but, slash games, because, you can put this stuff in games too. You have somebody that was abused all their life, that's a negative 100. And then their high point is, maybe they're able to survive every day, kind of semi-normally, but just broke as all crap. Yeah, that might be a negative 10. So there's a difference of 90 in there, and they have a good wide range. Where you have somebody that's very privileged and everything, and, they have, they just got a $10 million plane, a little mini plane, and it's amazing. And that's a 100 for them. But then you have like their low moment of -1 when they went to the store one time and they weren't able to get a candy bar when they were young. And that was a -2 kind of thing. So there's a difference of like 102 in that, where there's a difference in 90 in the darker one. Even though the darker one, the highest number is lower than the lowest number of the other one. But you want to really tell the difference of the story. And if you have something that is more like a -60 for the low point and a positive 60 for the high point, that's a difference of 120. That's way better than both of them, kind of thing. And that's kind of what I went for with Chromasia, because like we wanted, some really good high points that really, made you laugh and made you chuckle and everything to offset the really, really dark moments that were really, really low. And that contrast in there between the two just really makes your story that much better.
And I won't go to what Pruthvi, so I wouldn't butcher that too much, said about how far are you willing to violate your character's values to prioritize gameplay. And I think this is a very interesting point because we've seen games, and again, this is one of the challenges of writing a game versus writing other narratives, is that in a video game, the player needs information. And oftentimes, when you're trying to create character dialogue, it has to service that information. Like, if I'm on a quest to fight a dragon, I don't care, that your son is bouncing his ball against the wall too hard. I need to know where that dragon is. And we've seen developers will go for, like, the find the needle in the haystack approach, where, you'll have a town of 30 villagers, and maybe 2 of them in completely random parts of the map will actually tell you what you need to know. Otherwise, it's just random dialogue.
Yeah.
And
I think I personally think this, and there'll probably be some people out there that disagree with me, but I personally think that your dialogue and everything needs to fit into your game right. It needs to mesh well. And now for the issue that Josh was talking about, certain characters, only 2 characters mean something and the others don't. That's kind of the reality of making a town in a game.
Yeah, because again, you can't fill
if they all knew about it, then you wouldn't need to talk to all of them, and it would be just useless. Just talk to whoever you run into first, and then go on, with your quest, and don't spend any other time in town, kind of thing, making the town completely worthless, kind of thing. Or you make them hunt for it, kind of thing. Now, I feel like there's a good way to do that and a bad way to do that. I think the Trail series of games does a dang good job at that. Like, there's only like 1 or 2 people that actually matter for your quest at a time, but the other one will have meaningful dialogue that develops the story and everything. It may not be a meaningful story, but it develops more story
something.
And it gives the game character.
Yeah. And I think the other point, I think I just lost it, about, let's see, prioritizing character values, character discussion. This is one thing I also want to bring up. Games where the dialogue of the character stops the gameplay. And I think this is one of the things that
I missed what you said there.
When the dialogue stops the gameplay, that you can't do anything while you're listening to dialogue. And we've seen, like, developers kind of evolve along those lines. Like, if you remember, like, early games where if a character starts talking, then your character accidentally moves, you hit a button, the dialogue stops, you have to repeat the whole thing. What we've seen some later developers do is that either A, the dialogue continues regardless of what the player is doing. So as long as you're, moving around, jumping, shooting, whatever, they're still having a conversation. Some games will do it as is, if you get interrupted, your character will say, oh, hold on, I gotta do something, and then when it's done, you can press a button again to start it back up. God of War 2018 did just that. When you're listening to those stories while you're sailing around, whenever you get off the boat, somebody will say, oh, hold that thought, we're going to do something. And then when you're back on the boat, they'll say, so what were you saying? And then they continue the story right then and there. And it's essentially used as a way of making the travel time between the major points more interesting.
Yeah. I personally am, in a big favor of the really old way. When you start talking to somebody, it goes into a cutscene kind of thing, and the only thing you can do is control the dialogue. To where, and that way, characters emote, and you get emotion, you get the attachment to the characters and everything. They're doing all these body motions and everything. They're reacting to what people are saying, even if it's just minimum, like Disgaea, to where Laharl is talking to somebody, and then and then all of a sudden they told him that they accidentally washed his favorite pair of PJs, and then he changes to the really angry, outrageous face, and he's like, "What?
Yeah,
no, never wash those."
Yeah, like, you need something to kind of keep the player's attention as opposed to just having nothing but dialogue. If you were just reading that dialogue and just still images and nothing was changing, it would start to wear on.
Mm-hmm.
And to Proofy's question, what do you think about telling stories not through a script but rather mementos? So I think that's what we were saying earlier about the Dark Souls style, that there's no character. I think it works to some extent, but I don't think it's the best solution. As we said, like the Dark Souls series has really great plots to them, but not the best story. And they're not really designed around that story. Their games are left very intentionally vague in terms of, what is happening.
I personally think that Dark Souls doesn't have any story. It has a overarching plot and lore.
Yeah,
and I've always
world
said
building.
Lore isn't story.
Mm-hmm.
Lore is assistant to story, but it's not a story.
Yeah. And again, and I think
it's not that anything's wrong with the lore.
Yeah, but I think
it's
ultimately
not a story.
One of the things we need to clarify when we have these discussions is that a great story when it comes to video games it's not going to make or break games in most cases. Like if your game is
What
was that?
Good.
Yeah, like in narrative focused games it could. But oftentimes a good story will elevate a game, while a bad story can oftentimes be overlooked. Again, if the narrative is the focus, then no. Like if your story is horrible and the whole point of your game is your story, it's going to kill your game.
Or one of the main selling points is the story.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. We did the weird games.
The story is the main point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If the story is one of the main points, maybe not even the narrative-focused story, but if you're making an RPG, and when I say RPG, I'm referring to what Josh refers to as a JRPG. But if you're making an RPG kind of thing, story is a very important part of it. It's not a narrative-focused game, but it's very heavily in the narrative side, and bad story can very much kill that kind of game.
Yeah.
Because I know that I played RPG, not long ago. No, I say not long ago because I don't play much games. It's probably 6 months ago, and it absolutely killed me at the beginning, where it's like, oh, we're going to go, we're escaping from this thing. We're going to kill these dragons and everything, and it's like, and then right after we beat them and escape, kind of thing. It's like, hey, those dragons were like the most powerful thing in the game. It's like, so that's the end of the game, right?
Yeah, you gotta be really careful again with how the logical threads of your story play out. You don't want it to be nobody could ever beat these dragons and I kill them in one hit. Or one of the more favorite things, when the bad guy taunts you, you will never defeat me, and then you just one shot them because you over leveled them.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're going for, again, like a game where, the story is meant to be nonsensical, weird, things like that, then yeah, that's perfectly fine. Another, like going back to the Skea, renaming the guy Mid-Boss, and that's being his name that sticks throughout the rest of the title.
Yeah, and you got to beat it to actually find out who Mid-Boss is.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is quite a lot of plot twists there with actual Mid-Boss and who he is.
Yeah. I hate when villains admit.
If you're writing a game based around comedy, you need to have like comedic moments, like in all the time. Well, not all the time, but you need to have a lot of them. But again, with a comedic moment, you still need that contrast. Because a joke is only as funny as the thing that came before it, or in contrast to the thing that came before it. Not So if you're something really serious kind of thing, and it's like super serious kind of thing, and then you run into a minor joke kind of thing, it'll be a major contrast kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it'll get that laugh kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it's about the contrast.
Yeah.
And ironically, that's the same kind of thing that comes in pixel art
Mm-hmm.
You want the contrast between each color of the art, and you want to limit the amount of colors so that you have a greater amount of contrast, kind of thing.
And like if you look at something like the Bard's Tale, when they did the one with Carrie Elves, I think I completely put his last name there. And basically every scene was, how do we take this RPG? Oh god, my voice is dying. How do we take this RPG trope and run it into the ground? Like the very first thing you fight is a rat, and then instead of you killing the rat's the god king of rats, and he just kills you in one hit.
Hmm.
But I think with
But
that,
if your game is full of comedic moments, kind of thing, and you just don't have any break between them,
mm-hmm.
your game ain't gonna be funny.
Just gonna be just a loud, long stream of nonsensical things.
Yeah, if you just basically if you just have if you just do one nonsensical thing and then another nonsensical thing and then another one, then it's not funny. It's just random and stupid.
Yeah.
So you need to contrast that kind of thing, and you need to contrast everything pretty much in your story.
Mm-hmm.
How much contrast, that's up to your story. Like if you're doing something more on the realistic side of things, you probably have a lot lower contrast kind of thing, which makes your story a lot harder to give it character kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I haven't played any of the Witcher games, but I'm sure that writing for those games kind of pretty hard, because like it's a pretty serious game and there's not really much to contrast with. Where on the other hand, if you're writing a Disgaea game, like you can go completely nonsensical one moment, and then the world's in danger and going to blow up if you don't save it the other. As serious as you can and as ridiculous as you can, and have all the contrast kind of thing.
Like the humor with like the Witcher games, I think is very similar to that of the show. That it's pretty much on Geralt reacting annoyed to the situation around him. And again, that's kind of the contrast. Everyone's being serious and angry, and Geralt's just like, like, why do I care about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, and like to Matthew's point about Bowser, like again, like this is one of the issues that we saw, and there's probably a topic here about how much things have changed in terms of storytelling. We don't have time to get into tonight, but about trying to fill in the blanks as games became more serious over the past 30 years. Again, like the original Mario, like Mario itself started out Bowser, big bad guy, that's the only thing we know about him. Now, he's suffering, I think, like a midlife crisis, or he has issues of self-esteem in a lot of the RPG games. And this is some of the things that we see developers tend to struggle with some of these classic games, with how do you can't really take a classic story, unless you're Nintendo, and bring it to a modern market. So they're trying to figure out ways of, again, explaining the gameplay, explaining the world, in the setting where things are supposed to, make sense or, exist in a way.
We all know how the Sonic games went on their stories.
Oh, God, yes. And then it makes you, once again, reminisce about Mario with Princess Peach is kidnapped. That's our story. Yeah. We're done. That's it, folks. We got it. We can move on.
Ironically, Sonic had the perfect setup, and they never took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the perfect setup for Sonic was that one Sonic cartoon with Sally in it, where it was very, very dark and everything.
Yeah, that was like the best Sonic.
To get all the robotics, and like they were roboticizing all the robots, all the animals, and Sonic had to go get them, save them, and everything, and had this very dark context to it. But very bright out in the woods and everything, and had more happy moments out in the wood, and the dark contrasting inside the city, and like the occasional dark when they came and attacked.
Yeah, and like
Robotnik, they just
had
like so much of a good story there.
Yeah, and to Matthew's point, like in that one, like Robotnik, he was not deluded, like, and he was pure, he was galaxy brain evil genius in that one. I think one of the plot points had him just literally tricking all the good guys and winning because he outplayed them. And that's something you don't see a lot in children's cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
he was actually a bad guy to be wary of. Where a lot of times they just make him a joke, and it's a joke, and he's trying to be a bad guy, and everything is like, then what's the threat?
Yeah, like it goes back with the Joker and how they wrote the Joker character for a lot of the shows and the animated series. Like one plot point, and I remember somebody talking about this. Like one of the episodes, he wanted to copyright fish, and then another episode, he released threats to kill everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certainly a lot we can discuss on. I do have to get going in the next few minutes, so I guess. Any final points to bring up?
Make sure your stories contrast. Highs and lows, comedics and straight points. You always need the straight man to the comic guy kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. It doesn't have to be perfectly comic. You can play with the values there. But we're talking about, when I talk about your straight man to your comedy, we're talking about the value, the contrast between the normal and the funny. The contrast between the light and the dark. Just the contrast. You need your contrast, or else you're going to drag your story all in one direction, and it's not going to be good. If you have nothing but goodness happen, it's not a good story. It'd just be like, things good keep on happening.
Nothing bad's ever going to happen.
Or if you have all bad things happen, you'd be like, it's all bad, and I'm super depressed after I play.
And some games will go for that. Like we're talking like an emotionally driven game like This War of Mine, or even something like Frostpunk as well. Like these games aren't meant to be happy-go-lucky times. But
they still have high points.
Yeah. But you still need to communicate to the player kind of what the story is going to be like. You don't want it to be like your game start being super cartoony, everything being super happy, and then go, oh, now we're going to have a race riot. Like, it just comes out of nowhere. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to be sure that everything is communicated to your player in the best way possible, and try to mesh everything together.
Yep.
And, that's the kind of issue I'm running in with the Chrome Asia remake, is because like trying to get the art to mesh in well together with everything else it's a very dark story. So you want, generally for dark stories, you want to go with very, like dark colored grass kind of thing. But then it's very comedic at the same time. And for comedic stories, you want very light colored grass.
Yeah. You should just make it all like those like 90s Spawn characters, the 90s Todd McFarlane design. Make it as grim dark as you can. Everyone have like 10 chins and, 8 muscles on their arms and things like that.
And it's hard to do with 64 pixel art.
Yeah. But
it's just a whole bunch of dots at that point.
But I think with that, let us wrap things up for this week. And ideally, Shark, you'll have your computer back, hopefully, in the next few weeks.
Well, the soonest I'll have it back is next Friday. Next Friday they said on my processor that it'll be here somewhere between next Friday and the Tuesday or so after that. And it won't be here on the weekend. So if I don't get it Friday, then the next podcast will be like this too.
All right.
But if I do get it Friday, I should be able to get it put together.
All right. But be sure to check out our respective Discords and Patreons linked down below. And we will be back next week for another discussion around 4 p.m. EDT. And again, if you want to check out Shark, you'll find his Discord linked down there. As well as if you join mine, he is certainly on there and chatting. His motherboard decided not boot back up anymore. It died on him.
Yep, and I had to order a new computer. Not completely, but basically.
And hopefully
processor, RAM.
And hopefully my new microphone will get here at some point. We don't know. But everybody, thanks again for tuning in. Check back for our daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games, and have computer and audio related issues constantly. But until next time, take care.